Have we all got a good seat? You've all got your goodie bag. You're all very welcome this evening. My first time inside Trinity. Is it anyone else having their first Trinity experience tonight? Nice, isn't it? I feel quite at home, particularly in the banqueting hall. It's a bit of a home from home for me. Tonight is going to be a very special evening, an information evening about inflammation, which is a difficult thing to say, perhaps after you've had a few drinks, I would imagine. And I want tonight, and I know Una and the team really want tonight to be informative, but also empowering. I think often when you're coming to any sort of health event, you think, oh God, what are they going to be telling me about what I should be doing with my life? And it couldn't be further from the truth. We all understand how busy life can be and how tricky life can be. But the information you're going to learn tonight is super empowering, that there are so many small changes that we can make that can make a huge impact to our health. And particularly in the areas of inflammation, because often when we think of inflammation, we might think of acute inflammation when, something is red and sore and swollen, but often it can be more silent. But so much of it can be prevented, can be turned around, and that's what we're going to learn about. So the reviews that you will see are genuine reviews from people. The supplement at One has been such a huge success, but I know from the meeting we had last week that Daniel and Una don't want this to be just a supplement evening. This is a part of a jigsaw that you're going to hear from a host of fantastic experts about. So how it's going to run is we are going to have a panel talk for about 35 minutes. We're going to have a 5-10 minute break and then a second panel. So perhaps we'll get things underway so that I can introduce you to our fantastic panel. I never told you who I was either. I'm Claire McKenna and I'm delighted to be here. I have a real keen interest in preventative health and well-being, told without any finger wagging. So that's why I said yes when I was asked to come and host. So let me introduce you to our first panel. Absolutely incredible. Just in the door, looking radiant, we have Professor Mary Ryan, who is a consultant endocrinologist. She's going to talk to us about all things related to our hormones and inflammation, which go further than you think. We also have Jens Walter. There he is. He's hard to miss. An absolute expert. Some of the most cutting edge research around the microbiome is coming from the APC Centre in Cork, which is where he works. And we're going to hear about the influence of nutrition on inflammation. We also have Dr. Sonja Bobart, who's becoming my new best friend this evening. She has been amazing, and she's going to talk about, in her busy GP practice, how inflammation shows up, and she has a particular interest in skin. And who am I forgetting? Who am I leaving out? That's them. What more do I need? Can you join me on the stage, please? Now, everybody can sit where they want. It's kind of, you can kind of choose. You can chaise along that one, Mary, because you have more space. Fabulous. Yeah. Now, Mary, you're returning to Trinity. You did indeed study here.
I did. I was so blessed, and it's so lovely to be back here. I haven't been back in the dining hall, would you believe it, since I graduated. Isn't that terrible?
This is where the graduations take place.
Well, no, the graduation was in the exam hall, which is right opposite. But here was a beautiful place, so just gorgeous, and just taking it all in, and you just felt like pure luxury when you came in here. So when you walk through the gates of Trinity's, I'm sure you all see, it's just beautiful. It just brings you back, doesn't it? It's just heaven, yeah.
So all those years of study have led you to do incredible work in the area of hormones. So what would be the relation to hormones and inflammation, perhaps when they're out of balance?
So if hormones, as you all know that have listened to me, control everything. They control all your muscles, they control your immune system. So when your hormones, be it man or woman, are off, and men have hormones too, it's not just women. So when your hormones go off, you get inflammation. So I talked about periods during the week. If women have heavy periods, if they have irregular periods, then there is going to be inflammation, which we all know is endometriosis or adhesions. So when things go off balance or hormones go off balance, you will get inflammation. The same with the bowel, with inflammatory bowel disease. You know, hormones control the immune system. So once hormones go off at all, you'll get excess prostaglandin release, and that then is going to cause severe inflammation. So it's all connected really with hormones off balance. Viruses can put hormones off balance. This is the hormone control center. Stress can do it. Not resting enough, not pacing enough, very heavy periods, a very, terrible hormone imbalance around perimenopause, menopause. Thyroid is critical for hormone function. So if you have an overactive thyroid, where you're stressed, where your body is very stressed, where you have palpitations, you have sweating, then you're going to get severe inflammation if it's not controlled. At the same time, if you have underactive thyroid and your metabolic rate is really slow, then you're going to have inflammation, because the thyroid is critical for function of every cell in the body. So really the essence of it is that hormones control everything, but once one thing goes out of balance, like thyroid, like a really bad viral infection, like if you're overstressed, then the hormone control center can't operate the way it should, and then that's how we get inflammation. And it'll affect every organ.
And that's one of my favourite parts of your work, Mary. Mary is not afraid to pick up the phone if there is a husband who's making a woman do too much in the house, and she'll have no problem telling him that's not going to be happening anymore. She needs her hormones back in balance.
Yeah. Well, we all have a duty to, and it's wonderful that Una has done this, but the holistic approach is very important. I mean, I'm a doctor, and as doctors, and I'm actually, thank God, associate professor here in Trinity, as well as in the University of Limerick, and I lecture medical students. But one of the big things I try to cross to everyone is the holistic approach is important. We have a huge personal responsibility to keep our hormones right. So as a doctor, we prescribe medicine, but we always say you've got to have your diet right. It's up to you to get your diet right. It's up to you to recharge properly, to allow your hormone control center to be 10 out of 10. And by the way, when I talk about the hormone control center, I'm talking about the pituitary gland at the top of the nose, which controls everything. So it's up to you to make sure you get your to bed at 10, half 10. You need to get your 8 hours sleep. You need to turn off the television, make sure that that's your personal responsibility. The doctor can't do that for you. It's up to you to leave the rubbish in the shop and only bring the healthy food in. That's a personal choice, It's up to you to get your exercise in and to keep your body healthy, okay? And then after that, we doctors, of course, will help. And it's lovely to have the supplements, and you're going to talk all about that will help. But you've got to have the basics right first. You've got to have sleep, you've got to have the diet, you've got to have, how do you cope with stress? Stress, it absolutely disables hormones. So are you doing your deep breathing exercises? And make it realistic. We're all super busy. But we can do this when we lie down at night before we close the eyes. Are you taking the deep breathing that we know slows down adrenaline, slows down cortisol? All the research is there. That's going to help inflammation, okay? So there's so much we can do ourselves. Yoga, there's so much. And we're all super busy, but it's about a choice. And do you love yourself enough to do those things that you absolutely need to do? And women, and I see an awful lot of women in the audience, are dreadful at it. Men are brilliant at doing this because you were brought up to love yourselves. And that's so true, right? But we women have to do that as well, and that's our fault. We can't blame you for that. Yeah. So it's up to us women to love ourselves, to make those choices. And remember, we're mothers and we're mentors to our children. So they're watching us. So we want to break these dysfunctional cycles that have been passed down where women just go all day and then they flop. That's crazy. That's not listening to your hormonal system and trying to make a good, healthy hormonal system and reducing inflammation. So as women, we have, and men too. I do get men that overdo it too, but it's really important. Yeah. So that's a personal choice.
And speaking of women, we have an incredible model over here. You'll see beside, I've named her, there was no name, I've named her Felicity. I think that's a good one. And we asked everybody to put on her where there would be inflammation in their body, be they male or female. We haven't got a man just yet. But I do see around the reproductive area that a lot of people have put inflammation there. And as you have alluded to, the hormones control all workings in our body. So it's not just about these areas. But what about endometriosis, PCOS? Where is inflammation and the hormones playing a role there?
So once the FSH hormone, and I don't want to get too technical, in the pituitary gland basically pushes estrogen receptors in the body, and we have them on the breast, we have them in the ovary, we have them in the womb, and outside the womb on the colon. So once that becomes disrupted and you get extra heavy periods, then once things go out of sync and out of normal rhythm, that's when you get inflammation. So the girls' normal periods are 3 to 4 days. Once you're getting 6, 7 days, 8 days, that's going to cause excess inflammation. Endometriosis is got to do with, if you've got excessively heavy periods, it's due to a normal circadian rhythm, estrogen progesterone imbalance, and excess prostaglandins, these hormone-like substances that are normally only supposed to have small cramps, but there's excess amount, and that's why you get the inflammation. And that's why you get the adhesions, which we associate with endometriosis in the tubes, outside the tubes, on the colon. A lot of people get constipated, and it's a dreadfully painful condition for anyone that has it. And I'm a big believer that, and I wrote this book, and Una allowed me to mention it, It's Probably Your Period, and the launch is next Tuesday night, by the way, in Dawson Street, if you can come at 6:30 p.m. But we have to start talking more about this, how we can prevent. So it's about early intervention. It's crazy the way we're doing it, because at the moment what we're doing is we're seeing women for fertility. They're coming in trying to get pregnant in their 30s. They had their periods at 12. They've been suffering from 12 to 35 with severe cramping pain, doubled over, vomiting. That's not normal. And that has to be reset early at 12 and 13, not at 35 when a lot of the damage is done and they're going on to, have invasive techniques and IVF and so forth, which is wonderful. But, not everybody needs to go down that loop. So it's so important we prevent, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So that's why, answering your question, endometriosis, we need to get in on time as opposed to letting all that inflammation develop. And PCOS is where the overstimulation of the estrogen receptors on the ovaries, and you get excess bad insulin, which gets obesity. And patients, actually had a patient today that came in, and she her periods were regular until 15. Then at 15, for no reason at all, could have been a viral infection, we don't know, there's not enough research into it to know why this hormone started to go off. And she went to regular periods, 2 periods a year, put on loads of weight. Even though she was eating healthy, she couldn't fight the bad insulin, which is just putting on loads of weight, loads of inflammation. When you're overweight and obese, you have loads of inflammation, right? From the fat cell is really inflammatory. And as well as that, then she had regular periods. So this girl, thankfully, we're treating her now 16 years later, but she should have been treated at 15, So this is the thing that why we're trying to educate people, and that's what we're trying to do here today, to sort of share information with the public, because you can help. If you have a daughter or a granddaughter, you can get her in there early. It's all about prevention. I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, and it's amazing to hear you say that, because there is something going on, whereas any of those conditions, it's almost like people are led to believe they're just unlucky, and it's just a shame, isn't it? And you just have to struggle on.
Totally.
And if it's an average of 9 years to get even a diagnosis of endometriosis, which, as you said, is only looked at when you're trying to get pregnant, perhaps in your 30s,
Totally.
that really needs to change, because there is inflammation going on that could be looked at and treated.
And inflammation, I should have said, in over very heavy periods, but even with obesity, is one of the big causes of irregular atrial fibrillation, which is irregular heart rate, which is the biggest cause of stroke. So it's so important that we get this normalised. And the reason for that is that inflammation damages the electrical load in the heart. And we know that if we get the weight down to normal, we get the rate, people never go into irregular heart rate again. So it just shows you how severe inflammation can be. By getting the weight down and the inflammation down, you get the heart rate back to normal, and you can prevent stroke, which is very disabling. If you get stroke at any age, it's dreadfully disabling.
Yeah.
So it's all about prevention.
And I want to come back to that, because the role of hormones in metabolic health and cardiovascular. But I thought about it, and I'll have my back to you for much longer. You think I was very rude. Jens, I said in the introduction that some of the biggest cutting edge research around the microbiome is coming from the APC Centre down in Cork, where you are working and researching. So to those who don't know, tell us a little bit about the microbiome and gut health, and how good gut health plays a role in preventing inflammation.
So yeah, the microbiome refers to the microbial communities that grow on us, essentially, and in us. So we are colonized by trillions of microbes, bacteria, archaea, fungi, yeast, and we think we have roughly the same amount of bacteria at and in our body that we have human cells. So these are microbial populations. I like to view them as symbiotic partners, that we've evolved with and that provide really, really important functions. And one of the functions that are absolutely key is how they interact with our immune system and educate our immune system, and also how they interact with our diet, and this interactions between diet, the microbiome and the immune system, I think is key actually at, preventing inflammation. It's also key at these, chronic diseases, or many chronic diseases that we have, seeing now increasing actually in industrialized society. So I think there is and that's much, and the APC is very diverse. We do a lot of research, but an important, component of this research is how can we modulate microbiomes to prevent, for example, inflammation, to then reduce the risk of actually getting these diseases.
So you traveled to places where they have the non-industrialized diets. Tell us about the work in Papua New Guinea and what you found there.
So I got very early inspired by work in essentially untouched human populations. And when I say untouched by the modern industrialized lifestyle. And it's absolutely fascinating. There are populations, in the Amazon rainforest and in rural Papua New Guinea, they have virtually no chronic diseases. So they have a lot of infectious diseases. They are not necessarily getting older. Actually, they don't, but they have just no chronic diseases. For example, the rate of type 2 diabetes in rural Papua New Guinea in 1990 was 0%. So there is no recorded cases of multiple sclerosis. There is a Ama Indian tribe, very well studied, published in Lancet, so one of the leading medical journals, with virtually no heart disease, no strokes. Yeah. So this is something that fascinated us. And so we thought, look, let's try and study essentially an untouched microbiome. And I thought, that's 15 years now ago, I thought, where can you do this? And then rural Papua New Guinea just came to mind because I was remembering documentaries that I saw as a child about, cannibals and, and remote populations, and 800 languages are spoken in Papua New Guinea. So because it is such a, diverse and untouched population. So I was very naive and basically just wrote an email to a research center and said, send me poop samples. I want to know how your microbiome looks there. And they did, yeah. And we sequence. So today we can analyze this by modern sequencing technologies, and we just found much more diverse microbiomes. But we also saw changes that we could link to diet, and that really was the basis of us then developing this non-industrialized type diet that we then studied in further research.
So our modern day lifestyles and diets, how are they impacting inflammation in the body?
So when it comes to the microbiome, there are many different mechanisms, but the mechanisms that I find the most interesting, and also that is probably the best established, is that if you eat a modern diet, it's very low in dietary fiber. And dietary fiber feeds the microbiome. So what we essentially do on a modern diet is we're starving the microbiome. So you have this massive population of microbes in your gut and you're starving it, and they want to live. So what they do is they turn against your mucus layer. So they just start nibbling on your mucus and essentially, making this mucus layer thinner. And this is super well established in mouse models of chronic diseases. When that happens, these microbes then come at closer contact with the immune system, immune cells, and that drives inflammation and then causes chronic pathologies. It's only one of the mechanisms, but it's probably the mechanism that is the best established. And it's also something we see in our own human trials on these non-industrialized diet, that when we give Westerners, that diet, then the microbiome actually, basically goes away from the mucus. We see genes degrading mucus going down and genes that degrade plant fibers go up. So it seems like we can actually repair this to some degree in humans with eating. I was delighted to hear, there is, just this importance of a healthy diet to prevent disease. Yeah. So.
Because we may think we can't live like they do in Papua New Guinea, but we can influence how we eat. So talk to us about the NEMI diet and the work you've done there.
Yeah, so following up on this work in Papua New Guinea, I was a professor in Canada, and I was in a nutrition division. So we were super naive and thought, how can we turn this into a diet? And I worked with a very talented dietitian, Anissa Ahmed, who loved developing recipes. So we basically just looked in what do rural Papua New Guineans eat, and can we kind of recreate this using modern foods. So when we still used canned vegetables and beans and everything, but we wanted to recreate it as much as possible. And then we developed an entire diet, and because I was in a nutrition division, it allowed us to do a strictly controlled human nutritional trial. So we did a 3-week study. The poor students were in the kitchen for an entire year, cooked every single meal of these NIMI recipes, and we gave it to Canadians, yes, to healthy Albertians. And within 3 weeks, they lost weight, although they ate the same amount of calories. Their cholesterol went down 17%. So just in 3 weeks, and blood glucose went down 6%. And then this is an evening on inflammation. So we measured 2 inflammatory markers. One was CRP, which is a marker of systemic inflammation, but also heart disease. It went down 14%, I think, in calprotectin. Fecal is something you measure in fecal samples. Marker of gut inflammation went down 21%. So within 3 weeks, you could essentially, and it's very interesting because these are exactly the markers that we see improved in these non-industrialized populations. So it seems like even with a screwed up Canadian microbiome, you can still improve your microbiome, and then decrease inflammation.
And then, I think not only can you improve those markers, but undoubtedly those people start to feel better, have better energy levels, feel better within themselves. And then that can really help continue the motivation to keep looking after yourself in that way.
And we didn't look at that, I have to say, because
I knew I was asking a scientist. He was going to say that wasn't reported.
Yeah. But obviously there is a lot of research around, similar. And now also I would like to highlight what we do is very much in line, with other research on Mediterranean diets, so I'm not trying to generate the new, where we probably with this diet, we probably went a little bit into more extremes, specifically as it comes to dietary fiber, but it is still at the end a healthy eating pattern as recognized by nutritionists. But you're right, there's a lot of research, that this is also, it gives you a lot of energy, but it also, and we talked about this today in Una's podcast, I'm really fascinated by research on longevity, and specifically healthy longevity, which can also, so there were 2 big observational studies just in the last 3 years who, looked at how is diet actually linked to how long we live and how long we live healthy. And that research basically found, that you can add 10 years to your life, both to your life expectancy, but also to your healthy life. And that just blew my mind, 10 years by eating healthier. And as much as we didn't study this in a 3-week study, I can say that from what we saw happening metabolically and also in terms of the metabolites we detected in the blood, I do think that mechanistically that explains why you can extend your life with such a diet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. And Sonja, you and I were talking earlier about you graduating in the mid to late 90s. And back then, the focus was on dieting and restricting and what we were taking out of our diet. Whereas talking about diet and nutrition now, we're talking about what are we adding in and why are we doing it? And we're doing it to improve our health outcomes, our lifestyle and how we feel. And it's a much more positive way to be speaking about health.
And I think in the 90s as well, and I mean, me included, it was about restricting food. Whereas now it's about portion size. It's about what we're putting in and making sure that it's not ultra processed, because it's that food that's been adapted over time, that ready-made food. Talking about Canada, I know I digress, but I was in Toronto last year, and in a lot of the major groceries, it was all ready-made food. I don't know if you noticed that, which in 20 years ago, it wasn't that. And so it's just that convenience of just eating food that somebody else has prepared. You don't know what's in it. You don't know how much salt is in it, all the additives. So just being as pure as you can and making sure portion sizes are adequate.
So as I mentioned in your introduction, you have a busy GP practice. So how often are you seeing inflammation show up with the patients that are coming in?
And yeah, so I suppose in terms of inflammation, and I know I was talking about this earlier, we did an audit of our own practice, and the difference between the amount that we prescribed steroids in 2015 versus 2025. And there are loads of permutations with regard to that, but that increased twofold. Now we have to look back and see, well, what exactly was it for? But different things in terms of sinusitis, bronchitis, loads of itises, steroids were indicated, but that has increased twofold in 10 years. And different presentations, as we were talking about, if you have an acute presentation of inflammation, injury, that's great. That's your immune system saying, yes, I'm working. Then you've got the chronic inflammation, so that's your psoriasis, your autoimmune disease. But it's that low-level inflammation that certainly when I was in medical school, we didn't really talk about. We just assumed it was either chronic or acute. It wasn't low-lying. And the low-lying presentations for certainly in GPs today is something that we know now, that things like migraine, fatigue, Mary talked about hormonal health, and Jens about your metabolic health, your health in terms of your digestive system. So low mood really has, we know now that is implemented with low chronic inflammation, because your cortisols are constantly working, they're constantly on overdrive, and as a result we just feel fatigued because we're constantly shallow breathing, we're constantly doing something, and as Mary said, we're not resting, we're not giving our body time to actually just chill out and do nothing, or do whatever you fancy in terms of jogging, yoga, meditation, which is so important. And we know through scientific evidence that these things actually make such an impact in our day-to-day life.
What about then something that people might be more familiar with, and joint inflammation? What's happening in the body there?
Exactly. So for fibromyalgia is a big one. So fibromyalgia probably, certainly when I was doing in rheumatology, we were giving people graduated exercise, but we never honestly looked at diet. So fibromyalgia is a chronic illness that there's a great graph of what fibromyalgia looks like, but it's constant bruising all over the body. And that's the way people feel when that waxes and wanes. And there's so many indications for that. And I suppose the majority of it is that it's low inflammation, it's your mast cells on overdrive, it's your neurons in your brain and your spinal cord that just have really increased. And therefore that whole pain pathway is become completely skewed, but that's associated with so many other things. So in terms of inflammation, fibromyalgia is one. Autoimmune diseases, so things like psoriasis, we know that is a chronic illness, chronic inflammation. And yes, it can be family linked, but so much of it is environmental as well, as in it can be governed by stress, sleep, as Mary was mentioning, sedentary. So exercise is really key for things like fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, just because we know it helps to decrease our cortisol levels.
Because I often feel, and I know there are going to be people who have come tonight because they have a chronic condition and they're looking for answers and information, as you do, and you don't want, or I certainly don't want anything to come from the stage now to feel like, you're not doing enough, you're not walking enough, you're not eating right. And it isn't, we need to reframe that a little, because often when we have a chronic condition, we think this is just who I am, and this is just a bit of, as I said to Mary, PCOS or endometriosis, I'm just unlucky. But there are changes that we can make that can have a real significant impact on how we feel day to day.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to start with you, as in find your yoga. So for me, I was saying to Claire earlier, yoga is my thing, but I know some people love jogging, some people love different aspects, even that deep breathing, because if you think say you have a busy job, 8 till 5, you're constantly, your cortisol levels at that low end, you're kind of shallow breathing, therefore you're not increasing up that whole respiratory rate. So your respiratory rate is increasing. And if you kind of even for 5 minutes, just do slow, gentle breath work, that decreases your adrenaline, your cortisol, and in time, that'll slowly, over time, decrease your respiratory rate, therefore decrease, in some aspects, that chronic inflammation. So deep breathing is really important in whatever aspect of life that you want it to be. So whether it's your 10 minutes before you go to bed, whether it's 1 hour, I was saying to Pat earlier on, at 7 o'clock I do yoga for 45 minutes every day, just because that's the way I, unwind from my day. But, just find your yoga.
Can I ask you briefly then, because we are starting to run out of time, about psoriasis then and skin inflammation? Because again, that's something people are familiar with and you see a lot in clinic.
You see a lot in clinic, and with psoriasis, with the skin, so the skin is your biggest organ in your body. And it is made up of loads and loads of immune cells. And what it does, it protects your skin, it protects you against inflammation, injury, UV rays, allergies. And when your skin isn't working well, you can see it in terms of the way we heal, in terms of the appearance of our skin. We're all on our retinas or whatever, so the parenchymal skin is really important, as well as in some diseases, so such as psoriasis or celiac disease, you can actually see those manifestations of say a gluten diet. You can get this little rash called dermatitis herpetiformis with celiac or with psoriasis. That's your autoimmune kind of on overdrive and increasing up the way your epidermal layer is overgrowth, basically, because the skin turns over every 3 to 4 weeks. In psoriasis, it's 3 to 5 days. So therefore, you get this plaque over areas of trauma. So that's usually on the extensor parts of your body. But also in psoriasis, which is really important, it's also implemented with other things internally. So in people with psoriasis, a third of them will go on to have joint inflammation. So that's a significant amount of people that it affects, as well as things like dermatitis and acne rosacea.
And so many of the systems are just connected. That's what we're learning. I said that we would return when it came to cardiovascular health, because people might not know about inflammation in those areas and the role of hormones and everything there.
Absolutely. So I was delighted that when you were talking about diabetes. So obviously, if you have high cholesterol, we talked about diabetes. Diabetes is one of the most inflammatory conditions. So all of us, our fasting blood sugar should be 6, right? Diabetes, if it's not well controlled, the pancreas gland produces insulin to absorb sugar. If you're a type 1, it means the pancreas isn't working at all. You need insulin all the time. If you're type 2, it means the insulin you're producing just isn't working right. So with diet and drugs, we can get it better. But diabetes, the amazing thing is it is severely inflammatory, because it damages the eyes, the kidneys, the heart. It oxidizes your bad cholesterol and really causes a huge amount of plaque in the arteries. But the amazing thing is that with a healthy diet, with cutting sugar down, if you get patients early enough and upping the fibre and getting them through 3 healthy meals, you can really bring the blood sugar down. And losing weight, you can actually get away oftentimes with just diet alone. If you can get them early enough, it's incredible, and because you really help the islet cells in the pancreas. So diabetes is like, if you have diabetes, you already have twice the risk part disease of a patient without. But the big thing is obesity and diabetes are very inflammatory. But by just diet alone, increasing fibre, hands up quickly how many patients or how many people in front of us go to the toilet every day. So many people don't, because they don't have enough fibre, women in particular. Fibre is critical, and we have to go to get the gut microbiome going properly at least once a day. And the big problem is fibre, and obviously you need enough water as well. But yeah, any hormone imbalance, thyroid, cholesterol, if it's off, and this is a big thing. There's a lot of misinformation about cholesterol. Obviously, healthy eating and the anemia are brilliant, and reducing it by that amount is amazing. But if you have the LDL receptor defect, where you are unfortunately not mopping up the bad LDL in a man, if you have it, it'll manifest in 30s. In women after menopause, when estrogen goes down, you are going to lay down plaque in the liver, or fat in the liver, in the pancreas, and you will end up with type 2 diabetes because of insulin resistance if you don't treat it. So there's so much about diet helps hugely, and the NEMI diet really brings it down. But usually you do need a statin if you have that LDL receptor defect. And it's all about keeping the cholesterol normal to prevent plaque. So you prevent heart disease, you prevent stroke, and getting in time. No point doing it in your 70s. You need to be doing it in your 40s when it's manifested. And then remember that the arteries bring oxygenated blood to the brain. So if you're reducing oxygenated blood to the brain, you're going to get atrophy over time. And I believe that's a big cause of senile dementia. We need to be getting it in time. So I'm a big believer of prevention. And that's what I love about all this, is that holistic approach. We're looking at all the organs and how everything works. It's interesting you mentioned fibromyalgia. I'm a big believer, because fibromyalgia was very much a woman's disease. There wasn't enough research in it. And we now know with long COVID that the pituitary gland is hammered because of the virus, as what happened before with glandular fever. Hormones could come down, they come down to the muscles via a peripheral nerve, and the peripheral nerve, there's not enough. There's problem there, inflammation at the nerve muscle junction, hormone imbalance in the nerve muscle junction, and that's why you have pain. And we see this in women around menopause because of estrogen deficiency. We know we've added estrogen makes huge improvement, because the pituitary gland is coming back to normal. So I think there's a lot of work we have to do, and integrate a good gut microbiome to that as well, because that all helps. If you have a fatty liver or a problem with kidney or your gut, you're not absorbing estrogen properly. So everything works in synchrony, and you have to do everything right to get a good end result, basically. you know?
Yeah.
But so if all the audience here, if you just took away from tonight, eat a healthy diet, 3 meals a day, good fibre. I have porridge in the morning. If I can manage to make porridge in the morning, the rest of you can, right? It takes 2 minutes. And, you know, I add on the chia and the flax seeds to it just to make sure I get enough fibre, because we need 26 grams of fibre a day. Okay, so we absolutely have to have a normal bowel motion, and throw a salad in there in the middle of the day with your smoked salmon and your 2 cups of brown bread that you can make yourselves, by the way. Mary Berry said you don't have to knead it, you can just throw it in wet. So I do that, no sugar in it, no salt. And then in the evening, then you have your slow cooker on, because we're all working, your 1 potato, meat, veg. Potatoes are very high in fibre. Okay, so you should and high in vitamin C as well, by the way. Half plate of veg, and then your quarter plate of meat or fish, and you know that's, and try and get the omega-3s, the oily fish in twice a week, and that's the secret. And keep those sweet things down, and don't bring them home, twice a week, and that's it. You know.
Yeah, fabulous. So we are running out of time.
I love the way she said that.
I know, you're the best. You're the best, Mary. Would you like to add to that what we can put on the plate, Jens? Because I know that's what everybody always wants to know. Well, what foods feed the microbiome?
I have actually absolutely no disagreement with what was just said. You know, dietary fiber is key for the microbiome. I think fatty fish is absolutely key. Processed meats are probably the worst. Also both in terms of what they do nutritionally, but also what they do to your microbiome. And there is so Christopher Gardner is a famous nutritionist, and he said there is actually really only 4 rules in nutrition that virtually every nutritionist agrees on, and this is: eat whole foods, bulk up on vegetables, you know, go wild. You know, I think you can't overeat on broccoli. It's just not possible. Yeah. Reduce your refined carbohydrates. So this is unfortunately potatoes to some degree, but also rice. So make this whole, you know, go for whole grains, go for porridge, go for cereals, nuts, and all of this, and avoid added sugar. So and then the other things are obviously fatty fish, and you know, all of in olive oil, and healthy fats is also important. Yeah. So and the only thing, you know, is we made all the. Actually, if you get the book, it's all freely available. We made all our recipes freely available, but I also would say that this is just one way of healthy eating. You know, this is it's important that you stick with these principles, and a good Mediterranean diet, which unfortunately doesn't include pizza and pasta and gyros and all of this stuff. This is the confusing part. But if you look at in the traditional Mediterranean diet, is another really good eating pattern to eat healthy. Yeah.
I still always picture a big Italian table and drizzling olive oil. I still think it sounds pretty damn fancy and good for you. Before we say goodbye, hold up that book again one more time, and we're all going next Tuesday in Dawson Street at 6:30. Congratulations on another fabulous book, Mary. And to an amazing panel, to Sonja, to Jens.
And you have a book out as well, by the way.
I do.
Yeah, Claire has a book out as well, so don't forget that, Claire. Mention your book now when you were so kind to say mine, please.
Well, would you be well? But my sales are kind of done and down. You're going for the #1, and I'll be supporting you next Tuesday. Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And to Sonja and to Jens, thank you very much. We're going to take a break for a few minutes if you want to go to the bathroom or anything. But is there anybody who might be comfortable to share if they have been experiencing any of these inflammation conditions and that may have been taking the products?
Hi, I need a microphone now. I just want to say I've been dermatology in the acute setting and come across many through rheumatology, etc. And I suppose we're very quick and easy to find prescription drugs, etc., that cure things on the outside. So patients who present with psoriasis, eczema, HS, etc. And I suppose once we get them under control, the biggest thing we notice is that's fantastic, but if only you could help with, particularly in women, I'm not isolating men, but particularly in women and, you know, patients who are perimenopausal like myself. So it's fantastic to have something that Sinead introduced it to me, to be honest, because I'm a bit of a non-believer initially, but I am now. Something that helps calm at night time, you know, just brings the body down, you know, during the day and at night time. So, you know, it's a fantastic addition for people who are medically prescribing, medically, diagnosing, etc. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. I have a lady here.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. My 8-year-old was always really bad receiving on her eyes. And it's green on her eyes, and the rectus can't get rid of. And she then developed alopecia, and her head. But I'm just wondering, is there a link between the microhormones, the eczema, and then the alopecia?
Alopecia is definitely autoimmune, so we know that hormone imbalance causes autoimmunity. We know that hormone imbalance causes inflammation. So unfortunately, we see this an awful lot, particularly in severe stressful situations. It can be and all stress can cause autoimmune disease where the immune system attacks the body. So in those cases with eczema, yes, the microbiome is associated. I'll let you, it's certainly, but we would always say with eczema, low salt, make sure they're adequately hydrated, and really processed food and sugar just really.
Yeah, because I was actually born with no thyroid glands. So I was born without no thyroid glands. With non-functional.
You were born with no,
with no function thyroid glands.
Oh, right, okay.
So, and I'm just wondering, is there a link that she could eventually develop
thyroid?
Yeah,
absolutely. Because the most common cause of thyroid is autoimmune, which is Hashimoto's, where the immune system attacks the thyroid. And it is most common in us women, but I firmly believe it's because we overdo it. So maybe if we can train the women to look after themselves, we might reduce that significantly.
Yeah.
But in your child's case, certainly worth getting her thyroid function checked, to getting her thyroid antibodies checked, and working at keeping the diet really, really healthy. And certainly I would really low sugar and then a good microbiome as well. It's about getting the whole lot going and adequate hydration.
Yeah, because I took her to the GP and he didn't do any bloods or anything on her, just that we keep an eye on it. But I might have found 2 more patches now over the last couple of days. So it was just one at the very front.
Yeah.
And it's kind of moving in it.
Have you taken her to a dermatologist? Has she been referred to?
No, not yet.
Yes, I would get the referral because they will give you the topical steroids for that. But obviously, there's so much you can do with diet and rest and making sure that she's eating super healthy and getting her sleep. Because she can get all that, help her immune system in that way.
Okay.
And I'm sure Una will give you a packet of this to help as well.
It mightn't be eczema at all. It could be psoriasis, because psoriasis can present on the eyelids as well, and it can be associated with psoriasis of the scalp. And so with psoriasis of the scalp, you're blocking your hair follicles, and that can cause alopecia. And stress is a huge thing to do with it, and vitamin D.
Vitamin D. Right.
And she's got her mom right in her corner. So, you've got this. Back to the GP, back for more answers, armed from
I'll be back there
tonight.
tomorrow.
Thanks very much. All the best to you and to your daughter. Okay, let's take a break and we'll be back with another fantastic panel. But the standard has been highly set by these lot. Thank you very much.